Good morning, Govind.
Good morning, Sushant.
How are you doing today?
Very good, very good. Looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah. So we are live now this Saturday with Mr. Govind Iyer, and welcome to our Saturday live session. Facebook live session on Living My Promise. Before I start, let me begin introducing Living My Promise to you all. Living My Promise is an initiative where anyone with a net worth of above 1 crore rupees can sign up to pledge 50% of more or more of their wealth for any philanthropic causes that they want to choose. Today we have 43 Indians across the country who have signed up, and all of these have pledged to give back 50% of their wealth. And one of our signatories is Mr. Govind Iyer today, and we have with us Mr. Govind Iyer. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining. So let me introduce a little bit about Mr. Govind Iyer. He is one of our signatories at Living My Promise who has pledged to give 50% of his wealth towards philanthropic causes, a part of which he has committed for COVID relief efforts. Govind Iyer is a partner at Egon Zehnder. He is the man behind CEO Succession and board consulting for several organizations. He helps build business leadership teams and maximizes private equity investments for portfolio companies. Govind is also a board member at some of India's leading philanthropy-driven initiatives, such as Social Venture Partners and Govinda. I'm sure Govind has more to share about his philanthropic work. The most recent being I for India concert on Facebook with several Bollywood celebrities, which all of you must have seen. So sit back and enjoy the conversation. And if you have any questions you want to ask Mr. Govind Iyer, please post them in the comment section on the live video feed on Living My Promise page. And I will try and bring up some of those questions to Mr. Govind. Thank you, Govind, for agreeing to do this interview with us today. And welcome to the live session.
Thank you, Sushant. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah. Govind, before we start, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
So, Sushant, I live in Bombay. I've been in Bombay for the last nearly 25 years now. I grew up in Bombay and then moved to Ahmedabad for about 8 years to do my schooling and completed my schooling there. Thereafter, I moved to do my mechanical engineering at Regional Engineering College at Tiruchirappalli. Now it's called NIT, Trichy. And after a really enjoyable 4 years there, making lots of friends and understanding engineering, I must admit I didn't have a passion for it as much as I thought I would. I then chose to come back to Ahmedabad, and I worked with a fledgling company called Amtrex Air Conditioners, which was started by Mr. Sanjay Lalbhai of the Lalbhai Group, and loved it there for a couple of years, and then decided to pursue an MBA, and did my MBA at the Wharton School of Business. Fortunately, before that, I had the privilege of actually joining IIM Calcutta for about 8 weeks before I went to Wharton. And that's only because my admission letter to Wharton came in the day I joined IIM Calcutta. I did not know what to do at that point of time. But I made some lovely friends at IIM Calcutta and a great network at Wharton. Thereafter, I spent 11 years in marketing with Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, and Heinz, all in the brand management area in the US, Australia, and then in India. And 21 years ago, I joined Egon Zehnder, where I am today. It's like my second family. I've been here now since the early days of Egon Zehnder, and I'm really proud to be part of the team that's helped build the firm in India. I have 3 boys, 24, 18, and 14. And my wife, Preeti, is a classical Bharatanatyam dancer, done this for many, many years. She's also recently become a budding entrepreneur, I'm sorry. And before that, she ran her own business. So she's done a variety of different things. And with all that, manages to keep us all healthy and with the right values at home. So that's a bit of my family. I have a sister in Boston. And that's where I am, Sushant.
Yeah, that's true. Good to hear. I have my first question for you. Firstly, congratulations on the I for India concert. We got to see a lot of Bollywood celebrities. Tell us how it was conceived and we read that it was the biggest fundraiser on Facebook. Is that true?
So, firstly, I want to really be privileged to have been part of this fabulous concert. I had the benefit of seeing it from the early days of conception. It was, yes, it was the biggest live fundraiser on Facebook. That's what we've been told by Facebook. It was conceived by Karan Johar and Zoya Akhtar, and they reached out to the artists and sought their engagement and purpose behind it. And all of them were, delighted to participate in this. And it's really amazing to see how each and every one of the stars were committed to the cause and wanted to do something different and something to be meaningful. Sushant, it's interesting that the overall show of 4 hours was crafted literally within a week to 10 days with a lot of care and included perspectives from healthcare professionals, workers, NGOs, and who are doing some amazing work on the ground. So I think it was a complete package of clearly a lot of entertainment, clearly a lot of impact and passion, but also what's actually happening in India. All I can say is the board member of Give India, who were the giving partners in this program, we are very grateful that the organizers approached us to be their giving partner. I'm also moved by the celebrities placing their faith in Give India's robust due diligence process that we've been following over the last 20 years. And we are committed to, taking all the funds that have been raised through this program and through a very thorough process, ensuring it reaches as many of the needy citizens of the country very soon.
Yeah, that's good to hear from you. And it's lovely that you raised, I think I saw that, there are more than 18,000 people or 20,000 people who have, donated for this campaign. Tell us, how have you kept yourself energized during the lockdown, Govind?
So, it's interesting. I was actually at a very close colleague's son's wedding. And as I was coming back home that day, I was thinking to myself that it was March 22nd, and I saw that the lockdown was imminent. I think Delhi had already announced that they were going to go into shutting down their airports. And I said, things are going to get very difficult very soon. And we saw it coming. And I think I decided at that point of time that I have to do something for India at this point. And so I reached out to Give India, the team at Give India, and I said, I want to start a fundraiser, small fundraiser to support the daily wage workers. And we started by saying, okay, let's create a good narrative and let me reach out to my friends, family, and well-wishers and seek their help in supporting the daily wage worker through the NGO network of Give India. And lo and behold, that really took shape. We started with a plan to maybe do a 20 lakh fundraiser, then 50 lakhs, and finally it was a crore. And we finally raised 1.5 crores. And I was so encouraged by the support from all my friends who were so generously contributed that then we all started a discussion to saying, how can we have greater impact? And around the same time, Atul Satija, the CEO of Give India, reached out to me and said, let's talk about an opportunity to leverage our networks and drive on the ground execution and do something really impactful. And over the last 6 weeks, I've had the most energetic period of my life where, while continuing to work at Egon Zehnder, doing a lot of work with clients, I've been able to carve out the time to really, work with the Give India team and work with a lot of philanthropists and raise funds, particularly for humanitarian needs in healthcare. And with a very, very accomplished advisory board, and many engaged philanthropists, we've been able to raise over 175 crores along with the IFA India concert. And we are now focused on ensuring deployment to reach the needy at the very earliest. I must give compliment to the rapid execution by the Give India team and the heartwarming stories from the field. And that's what's kept me going. Every day there's a new story that comes out. Some of it is positive and some of it is very negative, seeing what's happening in the country. But I just want to add that I still love my work at Egon Zehnder, continue to have impact with business leaders. And I just love doing both this part and that part and doing it together.
Yes, Govind. We have a question from Amit Chandra before I ask you much more deeper questions. I would like to tell all the viewers watching, if you have any questions at any point of time, please use the comment section of the live video feed and post your questions there. I will try and bring up those questions to Mr. Govind.
But Sushant, I hope you are censoring some of the questions, okay? Because some of the questions may not be the appropriate ones that come in.
You are at liberty to decide to answer or not. I leave that to you. But yeah, Amit is asking a question. How do we get 10% of people you have placed during your career to give 10% of their wealth?
Amit, great question. I would love to send this message out to not just the people that I've been engaged with, but every single Indian in the country and every single worthy Indian who's had the benefit of having a very fabulous corporate career or entrepreneurial career. That it's really a personal choice, but I think starting with 1%, going up to 10%, and then going up higher is something that's very doable in our careers. We've been very privileged the last 10 years to see India really boom financially and for each of us. So I completely agree with Amit. If each and every one of us can choose to make our own decisions for ourselves, but also keeping in mind that we have been blessed by the generations before us, and and we should be doing things for the generations ahead of us. So we should be thinking of what we are leaving behind as a legacy, as a country, as a community, as an ecosystem. And so while financially we should be giving, I think like Amit does, we need to also be engaged with that philanthropy. And I'll talk more about it later, because financial giving is one component, but engagement with the giving is also equally important. So, Amit, my came to you is that I'm going to reach out to as many of my friends that I've built over the years and try to encourage them to look at what I'm doing and seeing whether they feel inclined and they feel interested, but it's a very voluntary effort and I'm there for them to guide them and help them.
Yeah. For viewers who are watching this live session, Mr. Govind Iyer is a signatory of Living My Promise and he has pledged to give back 50% of his wealth. I would also like to remind you, if you have any questions for Govind Iyer at any point of time, please feel free to post them in the comment section on the live feed on Living My Promise page. Govind, why did you become a signatory of Living My Promise?
So this is a very interesting story. Sometime I think it was after the Joy of Giving week. I don't remember the exact dates, but it was in October 2018, I believe. Sometime a little after that, one of whom I consider a good friend and a mentor, Venkat, who has been the founder of Give India and the founder of Living My Promise as a creator. There are many of us who got together, but he's really been somebody who's helped anchor this. Reached out to me and said that he was approached by Girish Batra out of Bangalore about this concept and said, what do you think about this idea? And I was very intrigued and thought about it. I thought it was a great idea for people like me and others who, couldn't join the Giving Pledge, which is really for large philanthropists, but in our own small way could join together and collaborate and find a way to collectively make a difference to the country. Individually, we can make our own. And I found Living My Promise to be a great platform to do that. So the first thing I did was digest it, understand it, and said, am I committed to doing it? And the answer was yes. And then I sat down with my family, my wife and children, and I asked them, what do you think about this? Interesting reactions. I won't get into that. I have 3 boys. They all had different reactions. But I think, ranging from why not more to, are you sure you can do this now? Et cetera, et cetera. But after about a couple of discussions, I think they were all very, very comfortable with my decision. And I really feel very blessed to have a family that's supporting me in doing this. And, I believe, Sushant, that everything in my life has come because of somebody else, whether it's my parents who've nurtured me, and give me the right values. And I think what we should do as parents is inculcate the right values in our children, ensure we provide them a platform for them to seek out their own dreams and aspirations, and encourage them to become financially independent and build their own journeys as soon as possible. So I don't think I need to necessarily give what I've created to them unless in an unfortunate situation they need it. And I believe that all I've got in my life is because of the goodness of others. And that's a very strong belief I have. The doctor who brought my parents who nurtured me, my teachers who inculcated the knowledge and values in me, my wife Preeti, who has always supported me, and my friends who are always there for me. I want to especially call out somebody who's really been the biggest giver for me, and that's my wife. who's really selfless, giving to the family and me over the past 28 years, has enabled the realization of my aspirations and for our children to do what they want to do. She's much, much more talented than I am. I can tell you that if any of you meet her. And it's showing up now in her new entrepreneurial venture that she started. But she chose to provide and nurture care for the family. And this is something that I think is the most important giving of anybody in the world, that they give to their family. So I feel, Sushant, after providing financially for my wife and kids to lead a reasonable life, I would like to do what I can do to make the world a better place. And hence I signed up for LMP.
Okay, that's a very nice answer. We have a question from Deepak Jayaraman. He's asking, how do you guard against burning out when you do so much in addition to your work, existing load at work?
Deepak, well said. You've been counseling me against possible burnout for I don't know how many 8 years or 10 years. I think you've given up. You've given up trying to get me to change. I just get energized, Deepak. That's all I can say. And yes, there's a possibility of burnout, but I think everything I do energizes me even more. So I think burnout happens when you get de-energized. And I do think it's important to recognize the balance. I sometimes lose count of the balance, lose focus on the balance. So I completely agree with you, Deepak. But hopefully with friends like you around and with people like you who can anchor me once in a while, I'll get the balance. But I think it's about focus and it's about what I want to do. I think you live life once and I want to give the most I can during that journey. And I don't want to ever feel that I haven't done enough in my life. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, Govind. We have another question from Girish Krishnamurthy. He's asking, Govind, you were a social service champ in your school days and your mindset for philanthropy and social service was ingrained then. What would be your advice to modern schools to include social service as a major topic in extracurricular activities?
So Girish, thanks. For those who don't know, Girish and I were classmates at St. Xavier's College in Ahmedabad. And Girish, thank you very much for that question. I think it is really an important point that it's important for the children today to understand what social service means and what's really happening in the India of today, which is actually the haves and have-nots. The divides have even got greater. I know that for my son, who's 18, started working with an NGO called Antarang in Bombay a few years ago, and I think he saw some things there which he kind of knew but did not know before. And I think I'm sure it touched him in his own small way to realize that there are people out there who have a different lifestyle, different privileges, and I think it's important to get social service in. So my advice to schools is to really make this not a check in the box, but make this a really important initiative. And I would probably say that as the NGO community and as the donor community, we should try to encourage schools to do more. But somewhere, I think one of the other things is also in the corporate world. We need to get corporates to imbibe in every employee that they must look at doing something around engaged philanthropy during the year. And I see a lot of organizations having a minimum 5 days, 8 days for training, for upskilling, many internal calls, many internal sessions for learning and development. I think it was all fantastic. But I think taking out 2 to 4 days a year and saying, give something back to a cause of yours and make that mandatory in some sense, I think will be a tremendous boost to the entire social sector and more importantly, the individuals. I know of an institution that decided to say that for everybody's birthday, they were prepared to make a contribution to an NGO of their choice and give them that day off to do something in that NGO. And that energized a lot of people in that organization. So, Sushant, I would say that that's not just for schools, to Girish's point, but I think it goes even beyond that, that we need to create a lot more awareness of social impact from early on.
Yes, I agree with you, Govind. I have another question for you, Govind. How have you thought about your philanthropic journey over the next few years? And what are your long-term philanthropic objectives?
So, Sushant, I might take a minute and just pull back a little bit on how I got engaged with philanthropy and then talk about how the next 15 years is going to look at for me. I got engaged with philanthropy very early on in my journey from the 5th or 6th grade when we had a very strong social service program in my school in Ahmedabad. And there used to be a father, Erviti, who used to run that program. And we used to go to small villages and help the villagers and the Adivasis with a lot of just helping them develop. And then we started doing something in our own city in Ahmedabad, the Vadilal Hospital, where we used to go every Saturday and help people write letters, people who couldn't write, didn't know, write letters to their family. And slowly and steadily, I started feeling a lot for those people who I felt were in some ways lesser privileged or did not have the benefit of doing things on their own. And I think by the time I was in the 10th grade, I was doing a lot of social service. Unfortunately, I went to college, and after that, for nearly 30 years, I didn't do as much as I would have liked to. The corporate career took over, and I didn't. At about 50, which is about 8 years ago, that gives away my age, I happened to get engaged with social venture partners through a call that came in from the founder in India, Ravi Venkatesan, who said, "Would you like to join the board?" And I said, "Join the board and do what?" And he said, "Join the board as a board member." So I said, "Okay." And I said, "Tell me more about social venture partners." And he says, "No, I'm not going to tell you anything. Give me a yes or a no answer." And I didn't have a choice, so I said yes. And that's how my journey in philanthropy started in a more detailed manner. And then I got to understand social venture partners. And it's one of the most amazing organizations that does a lot of work in engaged philanthropy by getting corporates together, corporate citizens together, and philanthropists together, and NGO, the NGO community together. And we all sit around the table and find a way to drive impact with the community. And then Give India came along when Amit, Chandra, and Venkat about 5 years ago asked me to help them finding a CEO, and I got engaged with Give India. And along the way, I did work with Asian Venture Philanthropy Network as an advisor. And I've just had the privilege and the benefit of getting these moments come to me, sometimes unsolicited. And that started my journey. What do I want to do going forward is really, believe that there's a huge opportunity for many citizens of India to be engaged with philanthropy. And I intend to be a catalyst. I would love to be a catalyst to drive this movement and hope to ignite this passion by inspiring others to start their journey of starting to contribute to social impact in whichever way they want. Financial is not the only way. There are many other ways people can contribute. But I do want to make a call out here that don't wait till you retire. Start early. I've always been inspired by Luis Miranda, who started the journey very early. Amit started giving early. Venkat started, I think, in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, being such a, and there are many, many other examples of people who've given so much, started giving so much earlier, time and money. And so I would say, don't wait till you retire. That's too late in my mind. You start early. So I would urge each and every one to start making their own contributions by engaging with the community for even a day a month. A day a month, 2 half Saturdays, a day a month somewhere, and seek out a cause that energizes them and just go after it. Because I think this is our India, this is our country, and we've got to do what we want to do, and not look for anybody else to make a difference.
Yes, Govind. For viewers out there watching this live session with Mr. Govind, if you have any questions for Govind that you want me to take up with, please post them in the comment section. Govind, we have another question from Gaurav Gupta. Gaurav Gupta is asking, how will you measure the impact of your LMP pledge?
Good question, Gaurav. I think firstly, I want to be clear that the LMP pledge is a moral pledge. It's not something that living my promise is a virtual organization. It's not an organization itself. And every individual who signed up, I think it's 43, right, Sushant, at this point?
Sorry?
It's 43 people, right, who have signed up?
Yes.
Every one of them has done it voluntarily, and they've done it through a statement that they've got a reason why they're doing it and they want to do it. It's really in spirit that they've done it, and we expect them to live up to the spirit. We are hoping that as time goes by, each and every one of us will share our experiences with the group. We might collaborate and create solutions together, so that if 7 of us are interested in education, we try and work towards education together. If 10 of us are interested in livelihoods, we might work towards livelihoods together, etc. But there may be an opportunity for Living My Promise to really create impact by inspiring many others to do this in their own small way. It could be setting up an NGO of their own. It could be and giving everything to that NGO. It could be working with NGOs that others have set up and contributing to them. So I think, Gaurav, if you're saying, are we keen to measure a tangible impact that has Living My Promise changed India? I, for one, don't believe that that's really what I'm looking for. Venkat is probably somebody that would, if he's on the chat group, he can respond to that question as well. But I would say, and any other signatories can respond to it, but my own perspective of Living My Promise is get many people to find their own purpose, their own cause, and go after that energizes them. That to me is impact. Impact is to have many engaged philanthropists in the ecosystem. If I can take the 43 number to 1,000 in the next 5 years, and we can have 1,000 people all contributing somewhere between 50 and above to their 50% and above, I think we'll make a huge impact in this country.
Yes, Govind. Krish Welker has a question for you, Venkat. Sorry, Govind. Nothing beats the experiences you had that have contributed to your learnings in life. But what books, movies, shows have largely influenced your learnings?
Girish, you asked me a question which I'm unfortunately going to be embarrassed in answering. I'm not a great believer. I'm not a great reader of books, and I do watch shows, but I learn from people. So I've learned a lot through my interaction with people and through what people share as their experiences. So I think I can only say that what's moved me the most is when I hear the stories of how many NGOs have been created and how their leaders have driven impact. What has shaped me is the thinking of people in making a difference in the social sector and in the corporate sector. I've been very inspired by leaders that have made a difference to their organization. So one of the people who I've not met, but I've been very inspired by just reading a little bit about him and learning about him is Satya Nadella. The way he is completely recrafted the way Microsoft now works from what it was before. So I do read a little bit, but I'm not an avid reader, Girish, unfortunately. Would love to be one, but it's never been one of my core strengths. So I learn from people, and I learn through communication, through discussion with people, and I learn from
them. Govind, we would like to know, what influenced or who inspired you to start giving? You have mentioned Satya Nadella, but regarding your giving, what influenced or who inspired you to start giving?
I think it goes back to my early days in school. I think Girish asked that question earlier. I started doing fundraisers and charities from the 7th and 8th standard. We used to have a fun fair, and I used to make, in South India, they call them bondas. I used to make these batata vada kind of things, and I used to sell them. And my mother used to make all the effort to do it. And whatever money I made, I used to give it to charity. And she'd say, what about me? I mean, there's cost of ingredients, there's cost of making it. I said, no, all that is household expenses. This goes to charity, right? So for me, it's always been from early on, and my parents have always encouraged me to do whatever it is to give to others. I mean, it's very interesting. My grandfather, my father's father, he passed away young, I believe. And it was very interesting. My father told me the story that they discovered that he had given money away to so many people that they never knew that. And when he died, they didn't have much in the bank account at all. And his wife and 5 children had to be brought up, but hardly anything. But his giving was just phenomenal. And people came back and said, he gave us, he gave us, he gave us. So I think it's just something that's nurtured in me from early on, Sushant. But along the way, there have been many idols that I found. Some who have been given financially and some who have been giving a lot. I mean, I admire the way Shaheen has built Teach for India and Akanksha. I admire what Akanksha is today. I think Vandana's done a great job there. Some of the organizations I've been associated with. Fabulous to see now how a young leader like Saurabh is building Akanksha. I just am impressed by the way how Venkat has kept the Living My Promise journey now started. Before that, Joy of Giving and Give India. Anu Aga has been an inspiration for me. Annabelle has been an inspiration for me. She runs Annabelle. So I can give you many people, but I've learned from many, many people. There isn't one person that I'd say is the only idol I have, if I had to be frank.
Yeah. Adding to this, I would like to ask you, I remember that you once said it's not always the financial contribution that matters, and that participation matters equally. Tell us why you feel that way.
I think it's important to understand that money has a role to play, and a very, very important role to play. But I think what comes with the money, which is love, passion, and engagement, makes that money multiply actually. Because if you know where it's going and you know why it's going there, you will give a lot more of your heart and soul into making that rupee or that money multiply. And I think that benefits both the NGO and oneself. And I mentioned social venture partners before this, and I think that's exactly what we do at Social Venture Partners, which is an ecosystem of engaged philanthropists who all get together, identify a cause, identify an NGO, and then work with that NGO, giving a small amount of money to them, but working with them for 100, 200, 300 hours a year to help them grow. And I think that makes a difference. I see foundations today that invest in a lot of people to help them make sure that execution happens on the ground and having dedicated people. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, one organization that I've admired and I continue to admire is Edelgive, the way Vidya and Nagma have built it out over the last 5 to 7 years, or is it 10 years now? I think it's probably 10 years. But I've been associated with the last 5, in how they've built a strong engagement model and education behind it. And Toolbox is another one run by, Vijaya, who has done a fantastic job of getting volunteerism into work. So I see a lot of examples where when engagement happens with giving, the multiplicity is tremendous. And there are some people who are more comfortable just giving money. I respect them and admire them, and I want them to continue doing that. But there are many who can give money and get engaged, and there are many who can't give the money for whatever reason, but they can get engaged. So I think there's a space for everybody, Sushant.
Yes, ma'am. We have another question from Manjit Kripalani. She's asking, would you include philanthropic support for better policy making? Tata Trust has begun to understand that getting policy right prevents the disasters on the ground, from food security to climate change. There is almost no support for better policy making in India domestically or for India multilaterally at all.
Manjit, thanks for that question. I do think I'm probably not as experienced or exposed to policy changes and impact, but I do agree with your view that there have to be some of us who should make a difference towards also driving impact. And one of the areas where I would love to see India evolve in the social space in the next 10 years or even shorter is for the entire philanthropic sector and the social sector to become a far more recognized sector and an ecosystem player where all of us as stakeholders collectively engage to drive impact. Today, I feel that there isn't as much of collaboration, coordination, as much of awareness of who's doing what. And I do think it's very important that the corporations get together, the donors get together, and we make the entire philanthropic sector a lot more recognized and a lot more respectable. I think there are people who I think question the governance and question a lot about the philanthropic sector. And from my experience in the last 8 years, there are many, many, many more people that are doing much more good things for the sector, much more good things for the sector than a few that may not be. And I think we need to come collectively together and get the governance of the sector up there and get everybody to recognize that this is no longer what I call a cottage industry, but an evolved industry with a lot of good people committed to doing it. So I think policy making will be at the forefront of that. I personally have not been involved in much, Manjit, but I know a number of friends who've been involved in that, and I would definitely put it up there.
Yes, Govind. We have another question from Firdaus. He's asking us, one area that appears to be the need of the hour is doing something to ensure the mental health of children who have strayed. Example, boys' locker room incident, the recent incident. Any comments on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion we have at home. I have a 14-year-old and 18-year-old, and we have therefore children who are at the age where I think the screen comes first and the parents come second. So we need to find a way to get them to rebalance that relationship. I know they love us and we love them, but still sometimes the screen gets the better of them. I think it's true. I think that there is a lot more social awareness out there. There's a lot more. It's more difficult to police and control, especially people who are in the formative ages of thinking. And I really go back to my early comments of saying we have to, as parents and as society, inculcate the right values from very early on, and really try our very best to hope that the children will grow up with those values and know what's right and wrong. But having said that, I think we as parents and we as keepers of society should find a way to do our best in a positively oriented manner, and not in a negatively oriented manner, to engage with the children and engage with the community, and do this in a manner which doesn't, I'm not using the word, I use the word ban in a negative way, not curb things, but try to encourage them to look at the options before making decisions. So Firdaus, I'm equally disturbed as you are with what's happening. I struggle to see what we can do as a systemic issue to try and resolve it. But I just think in our own small way, we need to try and limit as much of the group interactions, and maybe as parents get together with the ecosystem of families that work together and say, can we try and do something together, especially with the younger children.
Yes. We have another question from Gunjali Singh. How do you engage your children and broadly the youth today to be inclined towards philanthropic endeavors?
So I think, Gunjali, that's a great question, and I think I think it's important to first give them a sense of what's really happening out there, and I think it can start by involving them in something that we are doing. I think we need to be role models. We need to start by demonstrating that we can actually show something that we can, and bring them in. So I'll give you an example of something that was done recently by a family, where they decided to go on a picnic, and in that picnic they invited actually two families from two neighboring villages, and they said, let's go to a place which is not very far away from Bombay, and this was a village that the father had been investing in for a long time. And he called two families that kind of knew a little bit of English, so that some communication was possible, and brought them with their children, similar age profile. And it was so amazing how the children bonded more than anything else. And they realized that the differences at the end of the day were really marginal, but the haves and have-nots were very different. And the children came back home and told their parents that, Mom, Dad, I think we have too much. Let's give some of this to them, and let's start doing this more often with others. Now, the parents didn't expect that, but I think it was just a nice gesture of getting them together. And they did it in a very non-threatening way, without forcing it on the children. Said, let's go out for a picnic one afternoon, and then they invited these people, and they got talking. So I think you've got to match it. You've got to make sure the ecosystem is right. But I think, Sushant, we can all do it in our own way, in whichever way we want. I don't think, Gunjali, forcing it on children is the right thing. But I think giving them the exposure for them to make the choice is clearly something we should do more of. And schools should do more of that. And as parents, we should do more of it.
Yeah. Govind, Venkat is asking you a question. Your dad,
Sushant, can you censor this? Can you censor this question?
No. I think this is a fine question. Your dad, PVRN Iyer, was a rock star in his own right. What was his influence on your approach to philanthropy and social responsibility?
So my dad, my dad was amazing. He lived 87 years, and I think till a week before he passed away, he was thinking of his next business venture. He was just here, actually, on my right, where I'm sitting, and he had a small black book. And anybody who came in to see him when he was a little unwell, he wasn't ailing too much, but he had a fracture, so he was in bed. And he would ask them that, do you have lots of friends? So they would say, yeah, we have quite a few friends. Most people would say that. Do they like you? So they're getting into a problem. Yeah, I think they do like me. Okay, I'm starting a venture to eradicate blindness in this country, and it's a philanthropic venture. Can you get me 10 lakhs from each of them? Now, they did not know where to go. They were completely caught up, right? So then he would write down their name, and he'd say, okay, 10 people against this person. So Sushant, 10 people, right? And he kept that book with him, and he would make the notes, saying that when I get well and I'm going to get back, I'm going to start this venture. So I can say that, I've only seen him through his journey of life doing many, many things for others and giving a lot to others. And it has been a huge inspiration. My mother has been a huge inspiration in many ways. And so that's why I said early on that, it's been many, many people, My father and mother continued to inspire me because we've set up a something for them at the Ahmedabad Management Association, Ahmedabad, as a in memory of them. We do something for entrepreneurs and for social and for women entrepreneurs, for women in the workforce and for entrepreneurs. And every year, I'm very encouraged to go there and do things to help the community in Ahmedabad.
Yeah. Pushpa is asking you a question. Like she says, NGOs who need mentors find it hard to get started. First, to get connected, but more importantly, to leverage their expertise. What advice do you have for the mentors and NGOs to make it work?
What advice for the mentors? So I first think we should not look at mentorship as being only for people who are more experienced and old. In other words, okay, let me restate that. I don't think mentorship only comes from people who are much older and gray hair like mine. Mentorship can be given by younger people. I mean, I look at movements like Teach for India, and I look at movements that that are done by many others, like Kaivalya and others. And there are many good leaders out there that can be mentors for many others. So I think the first thing we need to talk about is that mentorship doesn't need to be provided by only older people to younger people. It can be slightly older people to younger people as well. We at Egon Zehnder have been giving to Teach for India our CSR contributions for many years. And recently we had a few of our colleagues engage with Teach for India in a mentorship role by providing mentorship to some of the Teach for India fellows. And it was a fabulous experience, I think, for them, from what I'm told. And I think mentorship, therefore, is available. My only guidance to NGOs is don't aspire to get people who are very senior because they may not have the time and they may not give the same dedication and support. And their experience may actually be too far apart from the younger people. So balance out what you need versus the mentorship that you need. Both can be valuable. And to the mentors, it would be prepared to understand that you are investing time in people who have an aspiration and a desire and a will to grow, may not have all the skills you need that you think you have. And so give it time to nurture and grow. Don't expect rewards immediately and have the patience and the tenacity to be able to take this through. A lot of mentors feel frustrated because they don't feel the change happening. And I can respect that. I've been there by myself. But I think we need to give people time because not everybody can grow and scale at the same pace that you want them to.
Yeah. Shri Maheshwari has a question. How did you apply skills and knowledge from your professional life to benefit the broader society?
So Rishi, thanks for that question. I think I've been really privileged again to have a fabulous marketing career and then 21 years at Egon Zehnder, and I've learned so much from my colleagues, whether it's whether it's the colleagues in India or globally, and I've learned a lot from the business leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I think what I've taken away is really three things: is humility. That's the most important thing. I find that that's the biggest virtue of most successful leaders and most successful professionals. And humility doesn't mean that you can't state what you've achieved, but you've got to state it with a view of I've achieved something or we've achieved something, but not that others can't do it. So it's humility of recognition that it's important that others feel that the impact is not because you were great, but because the opportunity provided to you and you did a great job. So humility is something that I've taken away, and I try to imbibe that in everything I do. The other thing is really the power of patience. I've seen that day in and day along as we've had the journey of building organizations, our own organization, Egon Zehnder, that it takes time for people to nurture. Just for context, at Egon Zehnder, every single one of us in the firm joins without any experience in search before we join Egon Zehnder. So all of us come from the corporate industry without any experience in having done leadership advisory or search work. So it takes us time to get there. So apprenticeship is something that's embedded in us to say, give people time to grow. And that's something that I think I have tried my best to imbibe in the social sector as well, which is let people grow, give them time to grow. They'll make mistakes, but you've got to be there to help them pick up their hand and help them grow as they go along.
Yeah.
Those are the two things.
Yeah. Ramesh Mirakur has a question. He's asking, should we try to persuade the government to channel a larger part of development funds through NGOs rather than government departments?
Ramesh, my God. I think the first thing we need to do is, whether the funds go or not, I think as a social sector, we need to speak as one voice. And we need to be able to come together and have a platform that we can address with all stakeholders, government being one of them. The government being one of them, the philanthropists being the other, the NGO sector being the third. I feel that's getting there, but I think there's some journey over there. And I think when that happens, Ramesh, I don't think we need to ask the government to do it. The government will on their own decide to choose the NGO sector, the social sector and NGOs that are really making a difference to the country. I think today I may be misplaced in my statement, but I'm not sure whether there's enough awareness of the fabulous work that so many social sector organizations are doing in the country, and the belief is that that's being done, but they can do it on their own. I think if we do the 1:10 multiplier, and if the government can come in with a multiplier factor and say we will multiply whatever you do, we need to convince them, but we need to also do the impact at our end. So I think it's something we should look at, but I don't think we can do it with a view of saying that they must do it. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Naresh Wadhwa is asking for your advice. He wants to contribute more than financially, but is not strong enough to face the realities of life in person.
Naresh, thank you very much for that question. And it's a question that I've had from many people, including myself. There have been times when I've faced when I've heard stories in the social sector, and I've literally not slept a couple of nights, or I've cried. I've not cried as much in the corporate sector at all, as much as I've cried in the social sector, because they are really, heartwarming situations and how people have made things happen. And I've overcome that by saying, over time, I will try and get adjusted to that. But if I can't, let me do it through my friends. Let me do it through people. So, in social venture partners, you can easily contribute without going and being at an NGO, but helping the ecosystem grow, helping provide ways in which the NGO can benefit by understanding what they do. In the overall ecosystem players, you can work with an NGO at the board level or as an advisor to the CEO by providing him mentorship and guidance of your tremendous experience over your journey of life through your variety of professional careers that you've had. And you could do it in a manner that allows you to do it in your comfort zone. But my only request to you, Naresh, is try to do it slowly and steadily from a distance, but start getting embedded in the system. You will feel that the warmth and the care and the love you get from the system will overcome your anxiety and fear very quickly. Because I really get really energized when I go and spend a few hours in the social sector in a village, or when I see what an Arohan is doing, or when I see what other NGOs are doing, or when I see what organizations that I've been impacted by are doing. It's very, very heartwarming.
Amit Chitra is asking, what can NGOs do to attract better talent on both boards and their leadership? How can it impact them, and what does it take to do that?
So I think the first point I would say, Amit, is that I think we need to look at will and skill. I think there's a lot of will in the NGOs to do something, and sometimes skills are not as strong. And we sometimes say, let's buy that skill from outside by getting new talent from the outside. The talent that comes from the outside might have the skill, but may not have the same will and passion. So I think it's very important to first assess what is the gap in an organization, will and skill. And if it is purely a skill gap, one way to do that is to look at getting the skill, getting upskilling of the people. And if that's impossible for whatever reasons, then getting specialists in there to help them. Again, not in a full-time capacity, but in some engagement model, which is more than half part-time. Because I'm a believer that talent has to come in when they feel passionate about it in the social sector. You can't inject talent that is not passionate about. And in my own Egon Zehnder career, I've seen that if somebody is not feeling great about joining a sector or a industry, if I've done the job of hiring them in that industry, they actually don't feel as engaged with the industry. They might do their job, the passion isn't as strong. In the same way, in the social sector, which has huge hurdles, I'd say a CEO in the social sector should be given 7 awards versus a corporate sector award, because the CEO in a social sector goes through hoops and loops to get things done. And I have a high regard and respect for them in the social sector. So it's a lot more challenging for a leader to succeed in the social sector than it is in the corporate sector. So therefore, passion and intensity have to be there in them. And not all of us might have that in the corporate sector. So I think we first need to create that. And that's the piece I mentioned earlier about let's start getting people exposed to the social sector from their 30s and 40s. And then one day they might wake up and say, that's where I want to go. What we're trying to do is get people at their 50s to start thinking about the social sector movement when they haven't been inculcated with that over 20 years. So Venkat, Amit, my point to you is going to be, let's start now with the youngsters. And maybe 10 years from now, we'll have a whole series of leaders who are in their 40s who might say, we want to spend 20 years in the social sector. Today, we don't have that. And we need to start creating that and nurturing that in the 30s and the 20s. And then going back to the schools as well.
Yes, Govind. Girish Krishnamurthy.
Amit, I hope that answers your question. Amit, I hope that answers your question. If not, a follow-up is fine. Yeah.
Girish Krishnamurthy quotes, there is a significant divide between, the urban and rural citizens in terms of, the financial wealth or social levels. He says that he has found rural citizens get satisfied more easily in life with their wealth and are more prone to helping others. The tight social relationships in villages and towns helps. Can we mobilize the rural engine for philanthropy in an organized and deliberate manner? Govind? Govind, are you there?
Yeah, Sushant, I lost you for a minute. You said Girish, just state Girish's question again, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Girish has said that there is a great financial and urban divide in rural and urban. He says he has found rural citizens get satisfied more easily in life with their wealth and are more prone to helping others. Can we mobilize the rural engine for philanthropy in an organized and deliberate manner?
Girish, great question and great observation here. I think people are far more probably contented and happy in the rural villages than I must share an anecdote with you. This was demonetization December 2017, I believe, 17 or 18, 17, I think. And I was at the airport, it was a few days after demonetization started. I was coming back to Bombay, and I met a bunch of producers, and they were at the airport with me, and they said, it turned out I happened to know one of them. And they said, producers that's a production cast. And they said, we've been for 8 days, we've been up north at a village shooting something when demonetization happened. And nobody had money there. We didn't have money. No ATMs were working. We had no money. And the villagers just opened up their houses and their hearts to us and took care of us left, right, center. Okay. That's India for you. And they reached Delhi and they didn't have money. And to even buy some food or get a Coke or get anything that they wanted, right? And they were standing over there and they were looking around and saying, will any urban person really help us in that sense, right? The rural market was helpful. Unfortunately, A led to B led to C, and they got on the flight. Now, my point is, I think people are a lot more gracious and giving in the rural markets. And if your question is how can we channelize that towards giving, I think I would actually pose it as a reverse question, Girish. I think a lot of us in the urban markets should emulate what's happening in the rural markets in our centers and in our cities. If we can start giving a lot more, and I think the entire coronavirus situation has led to a lot more giving than ever before. But we didn't need a crisis to make this happen. I wish we could do it on an average day. We can be much better. We can learn from people who have much less but give much more. We have much more, but we give much less. And I think that's the piece that I would like to say.
Yeah, Govind, I wanted to ask you, most individuals might feel insecure about committing wealth towards philanthropy in a substantial way, as you're doing under the current circumstances. What motivated you to accelerate your giving at this point of time?
So I think a lot of it is to do with how things evolved since early March, mid-March or so. But I felt that this is about the biggest, I'm hoping there won't be another one, but I'm hoping this is probably the biggest calamity I'll see in my life. And it's the time when we've really got to do our best for the country. And I think the last 30, 40 days, I've tried to just do whatever I could to maximize relationships, friends, and they've all come out and helped, every single one of them. Over 500 people gave to my fundraiser campaign. Over 12,000 people, as you said, came on the Facebook I for India campaign. And many, many corporate citizens and many foundations have contributed to the entire cause that we have at Give India. And I think what's motivated me to do more for myself is to say, what's the point in keeping the money for later? If we can't use it now when the country needs it, when our citizen needs it. I mean, the daily wage earners, the humanitarian situation, the food situation is really, really something we need to live up to. If this continues to end of May, early June, the agricultural industry is going to be hit really badly. And the last thing we want is to have a social situation which is difficult to manage. So I just decided to accelerate my giving at this point of time because of that and step it up big time. That's as simple as that. And, why save for the rainy day? The rainy day has happened in my mind.
Yeah. Rajmohan says, from what I know and had interacted with you in an earlier avatar, you work with a lot of venture capitalists. They should be a great set of people who can be part of the Living My Promise, including their investee companies and their founders.
Sorry, who's this who asked the question?
Mr. Raj Mohan.
Yeah. Raj, you're bang on right. And I think there are many people, Amit is from the private equity industry. He's been asking a few questions. And there are many philanthropists who've come out from the financial services industry and the investing community, and they will. But Raj, I think it's a matter of time. People pick the right time, the right moment, the right inflection moment for people to come in. Our mission at LMP is to multiply this and get many, many more people to feel comfortable about doing it. I recently spoke to somebody who was returning from overseas, and he was, I think it took a couple of conversations for one of the LMP signatories to talk to him and get him convinced and get him over the line. And he chatted with me as well. And I was just amazed at his generosity, amazed at the way he thought, and amazed at how he's moved his journey of thinking to be such a phenomenal contributor. I think he will be a real inspiration for many, many other people to give. So I think it's a matter of time, Raj, before many people come in, and it has to be voluntary. It has to be from their heart. It has to be at the right time in their lives. This is not something that I believe can be pushed on anybody.
Yeah. Parul Vaidya has a question for you. Shouldn't we look at philanthropy support towards corpus fund and not just project funds so that NGOs can sail through such crisis?
Parul, brilliant question. And I'm a strong believer in that. Strong believer in building sustainability in organizations. So I don't think the current year-to-year OPEX funding is the right way to build social systems. I mean, the largest not-for-profit organizations, I think, in the world that I know of are the educational institutions in the US, whether it's the Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, New York University, all of them. And they have huge corpuses. And they are run as not-for-profit. They're not-for-profit organizations, but they provide education to all of us. And they've done that through corpus funding. And I think I know of one organization that I think is moving towards that and making us a small but significant goal towards doing that. And I would encourage, a lot of the LMP signatories to consider giving corpus grants more than I, for one, would be more comfortable doing that than doing OPEX, because corpus will last eternity than necessarily for the year at end. But as a movement, we've got to drive towards corpus, and that requires belief in the system, and that believes in sustainability. So, Parul, you're bang on.
Yeah. Inakshi Sopti Singh is asking, do you see a shift in civic and social consciousness due to COVID crisis?
Sorry, do you see a shift in civic and social consciousness towards?
Due to COVID crisis.
Yes, I do see a shift. I do see a shift. I see a positive shift on the social side. Concerned about the civil side. I'm concerned about what the impact is going to have on civil society, but I don't know where it's going. But I do see a positive side in people wanting to do things for others and helping others. both financially and non-financially. And I think that's a good thing for the country and good thing for the world. I just hope we can keep this up.
Yeah. She also has another question. What is your advice to those who are searching for options to widen their sphere of influence and to give back?
I think just look around you and there'll be many opportunities that come by which you can easily sign up for. There could be a small NGO around the corner. There could be a small community service center around the corner. Give India, which is an NGO that I'm on the board of, has a variety of nearly 1,200 NGOs that we support in some form or fashion and help them raise capital. Go and check them out. Social Venture Partners is an organization that welcomes people who are keen to be engaged philanthropists. There's a lot of movements that many other philanthropists are doing in the country. There's Toolbox I mentioned earlier that seeks volunteers. So I think there's a variety of things. But you asked a very good question that for people who don't know it, there's no access to knowledge. And that's a point I made earlier, which is I think as a community and and I being part of that, we need to find a way to help people like you and others know how to get involved and engaged in the social system for those who haven't got engaged. And I don't think there's a common platform. And I give the analogy of like a NASCOM. The NASCOM when it came into being in the 90s really revolutionized the IT industry. I would love to create something like that in India, another body that really revolutionizes the social impact. And I don't know what that is. I don't know how to do it. But I think something like that is going to be required so that anybody and everybody can have an opportunity to go and do what they want, but they know how to go about it.
Yeah. So regarding the earlier question that Amit Chandra asked, he's saying elaborating on boards would be great. What we need to do to build better boards, what type of board members are needed in your view, and how that can take NGOs to next level. Give some examples is what he's saying.
Yeah, Amit, thanks. I ignored that question. I apologize for that. So I think boards play a very big role, especially in providing two avenues of support. One is clearly advisory support to the CEO and the management team. But the second is providing significant governance and building more trust in the ecosystem that there is some element of oversight and providing the wisdom of many years of a board member to an NGO. So I think every NGO in the country should consider having a board with at least 2, if not 3 independent directors who are not associated with the NGO, who don't come in there to interfere, who don't come in there with a mission to say, I'm going to question, audit you. Because not-for-profits are run with passion and intent. But who come in there with a view to say, I want to help you grow, and I want to help you grow. And how they can make that happen is going to be a function of getting the right chemistry match. The chemistry has to be very, very strong. And I would say, I think a couple of people asked this question earlier, people like Naresh and I think a few others, I don't remember the names. I think this is a great way for many of you to start getting engaged, getting onto some of the boards of not-for-profits and getting engaged with them, finding ways to contribute value. And I would say, Amit, you provoked an idea in my mind, which is, should we start, literally going out there and asking many people who want to start their journey by being engaged with boards. But one of the things I would do, Amit, is for people like yourself and maybe 50 others who've been on boards, we should do some sort of an orientation, if I use that term, on how to engage with not-for-profit organizations. It's not the same as corporate organizations. And how to make that transition to being a board member there. Because it's not the same as executing in a corporate. And so we need to be sensitizing them that they have to encourage and motivate the not-for-profits. So some transition path has to be there for people who not engage with the not-for-profit to be board members. And I think that's where board members who've been on not-for-profits can help others come in. But I think you've given me a great idea, Amit, that I think we should try and accelerate on.
Yeah, Venkat has a follow-up question. He's asking, how do you think we can start engaging those in their 20s and 30s with social sector organizations while they continue their corporate jobs? What kind of model might work?
So I think, Venkat, this is something I think is very critical. This is for the long-term 30-year sustainability of the sector. We have to get the 20s and the 30s to get engaged. And I'll give you an example. Right? When I signed up for the Living My Promise movement in end of, what's early Jan I think, Jan 19. I was amazed at how 7 or 8 colleagues from the Egon Zehnder system walked up to me and said, Govind, we are prepared to sign up for this. And I looked at them and I looked them in the eye and I said, wow, okay. And these were not people that and they said only one challenge, we don't have a crore. So I said, okay, so, but we want to commit everything we have at our death to some, because, we feel we have children who will get self-sufficient. So we'll start with 50%, move on. So I said, okay, let's think about it. Let's find a way to make it happen. There are some guidelines now, but why don't you get engaged with some philanthropy now, feel committed to it, build it up, and in 2 or 3 years, you'll be in a better position to sort of join the movement. And I got them exposed to many NGOs. And through that, they started feeling much more passionate about it. And they said that, listen, that itself is the first journey going forward. So I think what we need to do is get the 20s and the 30-year-olds exposed. And this goes back to my earlier point of corporates. Corporates have a big role to play in this. I mean, if my message, one message to as many people in the corporate world is going to be is, if you can just, I can request you to just take out 5 days out of the year, which is like a very small portion, 5 working days, and ask your corporate citizens to, ask your corporate executives to get engaged in a philanthropic of their choice and give them the options on what they want to do. I mean, I know Edelweiss does that brilliantly with Edelgive, and I know there are other companies that do it. I know an organization that's running called Connect4, which is run by Shloka Mehta, that builds volunteerism into their model. I think if we can have many more such volunteer organizations and get the 20s and the 30s to volunteer with the consent of their organizations, because I don't think it's about taking Saturdays and Sundays off. I'm not a believer in that. I'm not a believer in that 5 days I work my, work my heart out, my lungs out in the corporate world, and then Saturday and Sunday gives the social sector. That's not something that I'm, you could do it if you wanted to, but I don't think that should be the sustainable model. Model should be, I should be able to take time out even Monday to Friday to do that. And so I would encourage the corporate sector to start thinking of that from literally when people join them, and after their first year of orientation to do that. So that's my answer to you, Venkat.
Yeah, since you mentioned the corporate world, I want to ask you, what sort of partnerships do we need between the corporate world and nonprofits?
I think I've covered a little bit of that in terms of, I think there's a great opportunity for professionals from the industry to invest some time in the corporate sector. And I've repeated this 3 or 4 times, so I'm like a stuck record. But I do think the big one should be that, many corporates are doing CSR after the 2% law came in. But I'm curious to understand how many employees in their organization are engaged with that 2%. And if they can just get engagement with that 2%, I think things will change dramatically. So I think nothing more needs to be done by taking their financial contributions and coupling it with the engagement contribution. If we all agree in 2020, 21 to just make that one change, I think we'll see a completely transformed social sector. What we need to be careful about, Sushant, is we can't burden the social sector, and I use the word burden intentionally, with people who don't know how to engage with the corporate, from this corporate sector. Because engaging with the social sector requires a certain mindset and a certain appetite to empathize and engage with them. So not every professional will be able to engage with the social sector and directly, but many can engage with the social ecosystem. So there are different roles that people can play in this in engaging with the social system. Some with an NGO, some with an ecosystem, some with policy making. I think that Manjeet had raised earlier. Some in a different form through fundraising, through building networks. But I think each of us can play a role that we choose to play and what we are skilled at. But I think the corporate sector and the social sector need to find a way to coexist together and transition back. And the last point I would say is, I've seen this happening in the US, that there's a far greater giving back in the corporate sector and in the employees in the corporate sector. And I think it's starting to come into India, and I think India is doing a fantastic job of that. And I would say that the more we can do of that, the more it will be better for the economy of the country, because the social system also makes a huge difference to the GDP of the country. It may not be measured, but it makes a huge difference to the GDP of the country. It provides a much more stronger social fabric for the country.
Yes, Govind. Vishal Talreja has a question for you. He's asking how can influencers like you hold governments more accountable to provide what a country should be providing for its citizens?
Oh my God. I think the country, let me start by saying, I think the government is providing a lot to the country. So I think, Vishal, if you have a question, and you can maybe send a follow-up question to Sushant with a more specific, that'll help me. But I think every government tries to try to do its very best for the country. There are different ways in which we all feel, I personally also feel, that there are things that could be done differently. But that's speaking from the outside. It's like when I was a leader in my firm, I knew many people would say, I wish Govind did this and I wish Govind did that. But not everybody might empathize with what I'm going through and what I have to deal with, and therefore why my compulsions for decision making are. So it's very easy for us to feel that the government should do more, and I think they should. But we can't control that outcome sometimes. And I think people like me can be, and that goes back to my earlier comment, if we can get together as a group and there are 30, 40, 50 of us that get together and try to work with the government together, not work in a manner that tells the government what to do, but work collectively in a public-private way, we might bring about change. But I think the government's doing its bit. It's also part of our job to do our bit. And so if there's a specific area you have, I'm happy to follow up on a follow-up question. But I think there's a lot more we as a social system can do to make the government more aware and to work together with them. But I think a lot of things that the government have done have enabled the social system as well.
Govind Parul Vaidya has a question. She's asking why can't CSRs come together to help make a change? Why do they keep competing even there?
I don't know the answer to that. Parul, I don't know the answer to that. Because I haven't experienced it, so I can't comment really. But I think it's less about competition. I think it's something about awareness. I can just give you my example of the last 37 days since I've been working on the COVID relief program. I have found a greater sense of collaboration than I've ever seen before between philanthropists, CSRs and foundations, wanting to do things together. And I don't know whether it's the current situation we're in or whatever. So I personally, Parul, can't answer that question because I've not experienced it. So I don't want to go down a path I don't know much about.
Yeah, Vishal has clarified. He's saying specifically during this pandemic where basic rights and dignity has been compromised, also to reduce the burden of response on the social sector.
Yeah, Vishal, on the first question, which is on social rights accepting compromise, I think that was a decision taken. If you're referring to the lockdown decision, and that was taken in the interest of the country and was taken with a sense of information. I've had the benefit of speaking to some leaders in the corporate world and some leaders in the social sector. And I would say we can all have our points of view on whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. But I think when I look around me and I look at the rest of the world, I think we are in a far better shape from a health perspective. We may not, in my opinion, may not be in a far better shape economically, but that's for a few months. And I'm hoping it doesn't go beyond that. I think if it goes a little more beyond where we are today, I think it could have a much more longer term impact on poverty, on social system, on agricultural income. And that's where I feel that your comment will become very, very relevant. But at this point, I feel that we are just at the tipping point of that transformation of moving from, it getting to be a little more scarier if things continue the way they are. And I think everything I'm hearing is that things should come back sooner than later. But I'm not one to be a fortune teller, so I don't know what's going to happen. The second part of this question was
so also to reduce the burden of response on the social sector. What is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't think the government's asking for the social sector to respond. Let me start with that. I think we are responding because we want to respond. And I think it's a personal choice. But it has put a tremendous burden on the social sector, whether it's food, whether it's daily wage workers, it's put a huge, but I guess this is again voluntary, and this is the country we live in. We're in democracy. We're in a democratic country where we have the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, the freedom of living our lives independently. And we all have to make our own choices on where we contribute and how we contribute. And if it stretches us, so be it. So I would say that, I don't have enough information to say that I know for a fact that certain things are being done brilliantly and certain things are not being done. But from the little that I know, I think the government is doing its bit and we have to do our bit.
Yeah. Swati Agarwal is asking you, path from development sector back to corporate sector is not clear in our country. How do we change that?
Great point, Swati. Great. I think there has to be a much greater recognition for the value of social sector experience. And I think there have been very few examples of them back. I can again think of in the US, it's rewarded a lot more, and so in Europe. But I think we need to have some role models over here. And I think, Swati, you've caught me on this one. I don't know too many role models of people who've been in the social sector for 8-10 years and come into the corporate world and done very well. I can't think of them. But I think we need to have many more examples, Swati, on this example. And that's why I think if you start giving back to the social sector early on, in the 30s and 40s, a day may come when you might want to come back in and want to do more in the for-profit sector. And I'm hoping people will reward that experience a lot more. I mean, the only one place I know that does it very well is Teach for America, Teach for India, where they take students, put them through a 2-year fellowship program, and then they go back to the corporate world. But that's very young in their journey. But I don't know of any other model.
Yeah. Punit is asking, given that corporates now have to contribute under CSR scheme, why don't large corporate houses in India have specialized teams to deploy the CSR effectively?
So Amit, I'm aware of many CSRs having people that monitor, that evaluate and monitor the grants. But if your question is why don't they work with the NGOs, is specifically in the implementation, I know some of them do, but many of them don't. But I think that's because they feel that the NGOs know how to do it best, and they want to support them in the best way possible in advisory capacity. Some organizations are now starting to get more involved in the operational side. But I would encourage you to let the people who are, I mean, I personally would say there are organizations like the ones that I'm aware of, and pardon my limited knowledge of this, but there are organizations like I mentioned earlier, like Toolbox or like Edelgive or like paths that I've been on, Social Venture Partners or others, where and even what Amit runs is ATH and the foundation that he runs, which get engaged very deeply with the NGOs in ensuring that there's impact happening, and there is. So there are organizations that are doing it, but I think the foundations are hesitant to increase headcount and then try to get the skill in there and then find a way to keep them motivated and keep them engaged. So I would encourage these foundations, I would encourage organizations to be set up to drive operational excellence with the NGOs, and then foundations, you leverage that experience. So foundations should leverage the not-for-profits that are working with the NGOs.
Yeah. Govind, I would like to ask you, I know that you've done a lot apart from the financial commitments. What else are you doing apart from your financial commitments in the social space?
So I think, I think the financial commitment to my mind is the least of what I'm giving to the social space in my mind. It is meaningful and it is management, but I think for me, satisfaction at the age of 70, 12 years from now, is going to be to see the social sector evolved into a sector where there's a much greater sense of trust, respect, recognition. Swati's point where people can go back from the social sector to the corporate world, where there are many more corporate citizens coming in earlier on, where people without corporate experiences who've just had, just got a passion and will to come in there. It's a destination and it's a talent magnet. I mean, that's the word I would use, where the social sector is not a place where people want to go only if they don't have anything else or when they retire. And my desire would to bring all the passionate change makers together and find the best way to really elevate the sector, to be seen as a destination for great talent to build great careers. And secondly, for those with financial capital, to have greater trust in the governance and trust in the sector. So I think we need to create governance and trust in the sector and make it a talent magnet. That would be my aspiration for the social sector in the next many years to come. And I think this can only happen when a group of us collectively get together and find a way to make this happen.
Yeah. Govind, can you share with us how the Give India COVID Response Fund has been able to make an impact on COVID-19 relief?
So as I said earlier, it came about on March 22nd, 23rd, I think, Atul probably, yeah, Atul used to say 22nd. And I think over the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've been very, very privileged by contributions from many, many people in India and overseas who've come forward and seen that, Give India through their NGOs can really make a big difference. We are not an implementing NGO, just to be clear, Give India. It's more a platform and an enabler for the NGO sector. And what we've been able to do so far is really raise a reasonable amount of capital over the last 6 or 7 weeks, collectively with the I4 India campaign and with corporate donations and with foundations and individuals contributing significantly. We've raised about 175 crores, and our plan is that to deploy most of it before the end of May. We're about a third to a fourth, about 40% into it. And the reason we are not much more is because getting money from the US, FCRA, etc., takes time. So it's just a matter of logistics. But at the moment, we have proposals, probably 1,000 proposals from the NGO sector for COVID relief. And we are looking through those proposals, understanding what to do, where to do. But the COVID relief impact is really on humanitarian grounds and on the healthcare grounds. So two broad buckets. And we're trying our best to leverage what we have as experience on the ground in the NGO sector with our NGOs to see what we can do to make a difference. So far, we've been able to reach out to, I think, over 600,000 people through direct cash benefits, giving them the opportunity to get some money into the banking system in April and May. We are looking at a lot of food and rations to many people. About 50,000 families is what we're trying to impact already. PPE kits, healthcare workers, we are very aggressively trying to support the government's actions in this. Just to be very clear, the government is really taking this on as a big action point. Many high net worth individuals and foundations are doing this. So we are really supporting them in the healthcare efforts by looking at talking to a network of doctors and hospitals and volunteers to keep track of real-time needs of our frontline workers, which will be very critical in the days to come. And so I think we're doing it on the healthcare side, the humanitarian side. And I think the biggest impact has been working with the NGOs and trying to make a difference.
Yeah. Sandeep Bandar is asking, Give India COVID relief was an excellent initiative and congrats to all. But why was the amount raised not much higher? If you look at a 100-year-old man who walked up and down in his garden and raised over 35 million pounds, it seems.
Sandeep, when I become 100, I'll do that and hopefully I'll raise that money. That's all I can say. That's my answer to you, Sandeep. But good question. It's a journey, Sandeep. That's all I would say. If you had asked me 7 weeks ago that would we have been successful in getting to where we are today, I would have said probability at 30%. We set ambitious goals for ourselves, and we've been very, very gratified, surprised, gratified, and very, very privileged, and more than anything else, very, very thankful to everybody that's come forward. The 15,000 to 18,000 retail. I mean, just to give you a sense of retail donations, right? Since March 22nd to now, nearly 300,000 people have come onto the retail platform of Give India. Over 20 years, we've tried our best to get retail giving. And I think at the peak, and I could be wrong on this, but my memory is we were about 100,000 in a year. So literally in 7-8 weeks, we've been able to get so many thousand people coming through so many fundraisers. Individual fundraisers by so many people have raised retail giving in the country. So I think, Sandeep, it's a movement. It's starting. I think we'll probably get there at some point of time, but I think it's a long way to go still. But I'm very positively encouraged by what we've seen in the last few months, and I'm very encouraged by the heart and the generosity of many people in the country.
Yeah, I think I'll ask you one more question before you leave. There is an immense pressure on not-for-profits to generate revenue and sustain within 3 to 5 years. How should they go about planning for this, especially those working with the most marginalized? This question is from Mr. Ishwar.
So this is a very good question, because I think this is something that's very close to my heart, that and it's a very controversial one. So I hate to end on a controversial one, but I will say it. Maybe you have another question which will be more positive. I feel that in the social sector, we definitely have to measure impact, and we definitely have to see what we are doing. But I also think we need to talk about capability building. And we tend to focus more on impact and always ask a question. I mean, I've been asked this question on my fundraiser that I raised. It's amazing how practically everybody asked me the question, how much will Give India keep out of this fundraiser? How much will go to the NGO? And very, very genuine questions, very justified questions. What's the cost structure of Give India? Now, it's very interesting. I very rarely ask that to a mutual fund manager that I invest money in. I know his cost structure is 2.5%. That's what I accept. I don't even ask what the cost structure is beyond that. I very rarely ask the question to people that I might invest a stock in a big company. But here's a small NGO with a 5 lakh, 20 lakh, 30 lakh, 50 lakh budget. And we ask them far more questions than we would when we are investing somewhere else. And I don't have any problems with the questions. But what I do have is that we have to recognize that capability building takes time. And we have to give the NGOs the ability to invest something in capability building. And therefore, my advice to the person who asked the question is, go to the NGOs that help you do that. There are some organizations that focus on capability building. And there's some organizations that focus on grant giving, where they want to see impact with minimum cost structures. And both have their roles to play. So I'm saying you have to look at going to the right NGOs to get your support. And there are NGOs that drive capability building and will give you the support with accountability, with performance, but of a different nature. And there are those that will demand performance and demand the lower cost structure to get maximum impact of their giving. And I think both have their place, but we shouldn't let the second group dominate the first and have no capability building. Others will never build the sector. We'll never be able to build capability in the sector. The sector will remain a very marginalized small sector in the country.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I have one last question for you. What is your message to people who are thinking about what % of their wealth or income they should give?
I would first start by saying what percentage of your time you want to give. Okay. And I would say that if there's one message I would say, start thinking about from tomorrow, can you give at least 5% of your time in a year or 10% of your time in a year to doing something around the philanthropic movement? And that's literally a day a month. If you give a day a month, that's 5%. If you give 2 days a month, that's 10%. That's not asking for too much. So let's start with that. The second is on the financial side, I would say once you've got to engage with philanthropy, you should make the decision as to say, what do I think I need for myself, my family, and for my well-being, keeping in mind everything that I have as an aspiration without compromising your personal aspirations for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And then say, can I inculcate if you have children, can I inculcate in my children the right values to be independent, provide for a rainy day, but then say, what does that leave me with? And if that's 50%, so be it. If it's 30%, so be it. But I think work backwards. Don't work by just throwing a number out there. That would be my guidance to them.
Yeah. Thank you, Govind. Thank you for
Thank you, Sushant, for doing this. No, thank you, Sushant, for doing this, and appreciate all the questions from all the people who've been on this chat. And I hope I've been able to address them. But have a good weekend and all the very best.
Yeah. Thank you, viewers, for your time and asking some wonderful questions to Mr. Govind. And as you are aware, we do this Facebook live session almost every Saturday at around 11 a.m. usually. And please do sign up to Living My Promise. I think Govind has inspired all of us to give back more. For more information on Living My Promise, please go check our website, www.livingmypromise.org. And stay tuned. Come back next Saturday. Thank you, Govind. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Sushant.